Welcome to Showcase of Churches, where I interview people involved in Christian ministry. Today, my guest is Laura Rau, who has been an inpatient case manager and is currently, I'm going to read her current title because it's pretty long. She is a program director for Good News Community Health Center Stress Recovery Program in Rockwood, Oregon. Okay, I first met Laura.
I'm sorry,
years
I'm a
ago.
program designer.
Program designer.
Not
okay.
a program
I knew I wasn't going to get it all right because it's a pretty long title.
Right.
Okay. I first met Laura years ago at a compassion clinic, which was a free neighborhood clinic. When she had flyers out on her table about stress on her table, along with other free items she was giving out to people. So, Laura, thank you so much for coming today on Showcase of Churches.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you for all you do behind the scenes for the community, and especially your work with compassion clinics.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that's been fun. All right, first we'll show a clip of her teaching on stress recovery. Then we will start the interview. We may elaborate a little bit more on things we've seen mentioned in the video.
Did you know that stress recovery can improve not only your health but your happiness? And your body is already equipped to help you recover from times of high stress. We want to introduce some tools and some training to promote stress recovery as part of healthcare. Our first tool, if you'd let me take a minute to introduce it, is the stress scale. Much like a pain scale, we're going to ask you to rate your stress on a scale from 1 to 10. Take a look at it and see that when you're feeling anxious, fearful, irritable, overwhelmed, that can be an indicator of high stress. And stress, when it's unresolved and high over time, can cause distress. It's a whole different kind of pain that affects not just your body, but your mind, your will, and your emotions. It's important to be able to identify and explain when stress feels like it's impacting you, but it's even more important to know what to do about it. Emergency workers have extensive training in order to be able to stay healthy and productive in times of high stress, and we believe all of us can benefit from some of that kind of understanding. Here's another tool to help us understand how our body is designed to heal and recover. Specifically, when it comes to stress, our nervous systems have 3 systems within the system. One is where our rational brain is functioning well. It's uniquely human to be able to live at such a high capacity for creativity and problem solving. But when we are triggered by threat or danger, automatically our sympathetic nervous system overrides that rational system and gives us energy to just survive as a focus. We call that the flight, fight, freeze response. Not as automatically do we go into recovery, but it's important that we do. That's our parasympathetic nervous system that allows us to slow down, rest, digest, process, and recover. In other words, heal before returning to high functioning, thriving. We want to move that direction because when we are in our rational brain, we're best able to solve the problems that have caused the stress. It's easy to get stuck in stress. We all do sometimes, but the trouble with it is that our heart and blood pressure and blood sugar stay elevated too long. Our immune system gets depleted, our digestive tract is slowed down, our judgment's impaired, and our memory too. But the emotions of being under high stress are hard too. The irritability and the anxiety of it. And behaviors, have you noticed, that are driven by anxiety or anger, they're not only hard for us, but the people around us. The good news is the bad effects of high stress don't have to be a big part of our life when we know how to rest, digest, and recover, master ways of being restored. In that recovery process, it's your choices that matter. You may find that your survival brain resists moving into recovery, just like a child might resist a nap, but through intentionality, you can choose little ways to take mini vacations, even if you can't take a full tropical vacation away from stress in your life. Here's a planner that we've created as one of our key tools. You're able to take this and get ideas that we've gleaned from different branches of medicine, like behavioral health, addiction medicine, mental health, and even pastoral care. Ways that we can follow that model of slowing down, processing, and being restored and able to sustain life in times of stress. Sometimes, though, the results of stress have become embedded and are difficult to deal with alone, and it's healthy to ask for help. We're committed to finding resources that are affordable and local for you for the specialized care that unresolved trauma, addictions, or abuse may cause, for example. All of our fears that create stress are important. And so we also honor spiritual care and your spiritual resources. As the Bible says, God is the one who can deliver us from all our fears. So we're there to pray for you and with you as we're all looking for stress recovery together.
Well, thank you. That was very nice. I enjoyed it. Who did you originally develop this video for?
Well, we're actually piloting this program. So that was a pilot little film that patients at Good News Community Health Center will see in order to introduce them to these new tools, such as this stress scale. The reason we want to do that is we want to be sensitive to some of the issues of life that are caused by stress, not only as to how they contribute to their health or blood pressure, but also getting to know them better and showing care for their whole life and even some of the struggles that they have.
Good. Well, now I would like to know, and probably our viewers would like to know, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and education.
Sure. I have worked as a hospital nurse in many departments through the years, many years of nursing, but my final years I was trained and worked as an RN case manager in an inpatient setting. And in that setting I looked at a lot of complex cases with the doctors to create integrated plans for patients. And there I saw a lot of stress issues and how they compounded in patients' needs. At the same time, I became involved and worked as a board member on the founding of Good News Community Health Center and worked as a volunteer there. And that's when I developed a program for stress management. Now I'm retired, and the older I get, the more excited I am about stress recovery. Not just managing stress, but actually recovering from it and its effects on people's health.
All right. And what inspired you then? You touched on that a little bit, but do you want to go a little bit more on how you were inspired to do this?
Well, in my own life, I had a prolonged time of stress that ended up with some serious physical and emotional problems because of that. And so, like a lot of people on their own journey, they find a kinship with a calling, you might say. And so my own life and healing has been a primary motivation, as well as how that linked in with my work of seeing patients over the years. The benefits of doing something for a long time is that you see patterns, and you see, I saw myself in a way in other situations, but some of the same principles of how stress had wear and tear on not just on their bodies, but their emotions or motivation and things. So I could connect with patients better that way. I'm also very inspired at Good News Community Health Center because it is a clinic, still is, even though the founding Dr. Sison has retired. Still remains a team of people who really love God and really love people and want to serve them well. But the whole idea of serving the whole person requires a definite program, you might say, so that it can be intentional and people are given opportunities to talk about some of their emotional needs and some of the struggles that they're going through. It helps us know them, and because we all commonly share stress, we get to know one another and create a climate where it's safe to talk about some of those more personal things. It also is passionate for me to make that easy for the staff by having tools, and also every time a patient can recover from a stressful situation a little faster, a little better because of things we have done, that is the biggest inspiration, is to see other people benefit.
And I think you even said, too, that just letting them talk and express it in words could be a healing thing for them,
There are
too.
a lot of things that come out of it. We may find ways to help them. We may help them find resources. We may pray with them. But just to have feelings validated is a way of showing understanding, and that can encourage people.
Good, I believe it. Okay, it's hard to avoid stress with so much that's going on these days. But I know I've heard anyway, that there's bad stress and there's good stress. Can you kind of compare the two for us?
Well, I think what people commonly call bad stress is the kind that that triggers fear or threat, and so sets our bodies into the sympathetic nervous system, which is the flight, fight, freeze. And that's the area that puts us most at risk because we're not thinking as clearly and our bodies are activated just for survival, as we mentioned. But stress itself is neither good nor bad. Think of stress on a muscle. We need that to keep a muscle active and even for it to build it and grow it. But it's when there's too much stress or strain on the muscle that it can do damage. And it's the same thing with stress. Some people have just an incredible capacity for stress and others don't. So a lot of it depends on how we deal with the stress, and also not necessarily what the situation is. For example, it could be a wedding, a wonderful experience, and yet if the bride feels like she doesn't have enough time or enough money to get it done, all of a sudden she can get irritable and even angry and frustrated, and then suddenly it's not quite the romantic adventure it used to be. So it's not always good or bad things, good or bad stress. It is the stress that creates the negative energy, you might say, that goes with the emotions of the sympathetic or survival response.
Okay. And then sometimes, you said sometimes that even if we're chased or something we might feel, or something about if you heard a siren, and even if you knew he wasn't after you, that it could maybe, trigger some tension.
The sympathetic nervous system is an automatic response. And so it creates anxiety. It creates anger as it elevates. And that's can just be a perceived threat. Can create the same amount of energy and emotions as a real threat.
Well, I noticed years ago I was watching, and I like high-impact adventure, I'll admit. And I was sitting, it's one of those edge of your seat, tensed up, thing. And all of a sudden I felt like the Lord showed me, your body and the emotions are reacting the same way as if you really were in that situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's one of the things that's very tricky. The sympathetic nervous system ideally is something that helps us in an actual emergency that requires a physical response, like running away or fighting. But that's not always what is needed. And it's not always bad. If you did have a near-miss accident, for example, you'll feel that rush and your heart rate pounding, your mouth might go dry, but it can resolve without doing any significant damage to your health when you can recover quickly.
Okay, that's good. So quick recovery is what
Yes.
it looks like. Well, I know you shared on the video how stress affects our immune system. Are there any specific health concerns that can follow a time of stress?
Well, yes, a lot. And in fact, in our culture of high stress, we're seeing stress-related issues epidemically rise. And that's another big motivation for me to encourage people to know how to recover from stress. Recovering from stress is very different from running away from stress. That's an important thing to know. But the damage comes from long-term unresolved stress. So think about first of all, the physical things that happen. Your heart rate's up, your blood pressure's up, your blood sugar goes up to give you that burst of energy. But that can set you up for chronic diseases involving your heart and blood sugar, obviously. Your digestive tract, your sexual desires, all of those kinds of things kind of go on hold until the emergency is over. And so you can see sexual dysfunction, you can see digestive issues. The emotions, those are just examples. The immune system is another because it gets depleted. And so there are systems that just get depleted. And then you feel not only depleted, but often depressed because your feel-good hormones get used up and you don't feel you can respond to another emergency, you might say. The emotions, though, and the thoughts that go with those emotions are negative, and that can drive very negative behaviors. We know that anxiety is uncomfortable and drives people to eat too much, drink too much, whatever, shop too much, So those addictive types of things, even worry, which is thoughts that are too much, those things can be difficult to deal with, and certainly anger and rage. Your brain is crazy. It's like cocaine to be enraged, and you can do crazy stuff you really regret.
Wow. Sounds like these are all good reasons to manage your stress and to get recovery. Well, I'm wondering, do some people experience fight or flight, seeing things a little bit more dangerous than they really are? Does that ever happen?
That's such a good question and so true. And we can use a funny example. Maybe a woman sees a mouse and screams and runs out of the house just as terrified as if she'd seen a lion or a bear. And that's because our survival brain is more of a primal part, the amygdala type of reaction, which is more like an animal. So we're not as refined in our responses. And then on top of that, if you haven't resolved a traumatic situation, for example, like being bitten by a dog when you're a child, every time you see that dog, you perceive a threat. And it's not always conscious, because actually our survival response needs to be something that we don't have to think a lot about to get us out of danger quickly, but there are times when it can work against us if we haven't resolved that once it's over.
Wow. All right, well then what could be some specific actions from this type of thing? I mean, people shut down, do they avoid situations? What is actually the action that usually happens?
Well, in our day and age, we don't often have maybe a bear coming into our camp, you might say, that we need to literally run and fight. Sometimes we'd be better off staying still and really thinking about something or strategizing, and that's where we need to get to as quickly as possible. But if we're not careful, and this is why stress recovery is so important, if we're not careful, that nervous energy is what goes into addiction or anger. So we've got all this energy and it needs somewhere healthy to go. And when you're under stress, isn't a good time to make that plan. That's why we like to make a plan ahead of time, like an emergency preparedness, so that you make good choices what to do with that energy instead.
Okay. And we've talked about lions and mice and car accidents and stuff like that, but is it correct to think a person might consider some past relationships where they wounded people, so now they're threatened by getting into a relationship, and so they maybe avoid or get distractions?
That is what is important about holistic health, because we cannot just, we can be wounded not only in our bodies, but in our minds, our wills, our emotions, spiritually. And so an emotional wound is very, very important to process. And there are tools for that too that are important. That's why processing, when you think about rest, digest, and recover, the digestive process means you've kind of sorted things out. You've eliminated some things and you have held on to other things and brought in some new stuff. Especially with emotional wounds, it's important to release some of the toxic stuff like bitterness or letting anger fester. Anger tells you something's wrong, but if you hold on to it, it becomes toxic. And then it can be floating around unresolved, unreleased, and then it causes you to react when you feel that perceived threat. happening again. It takes a recovery process to recover from an emotional wound just like a physical one.
Okay.
And so very true.
And what are some telltale signs that a person is under stress? I think you mentioned irritability in the video.
Yeah. Right. So again, it has to do with some of the physical things. One of the points is to be self-aware. Your mouth can get dry, your heart rate goes up, you can feel tension in your jaw when you're first getting just that hyper vigilance, kind of like Bambi being alert when there's a smell of fire. Then it escalates to actually running, being literally afraid, and then your heart rate is even more. You can have trouble pounding in your chest. You can everybody kind of has things differently. Some people sweat a lot, some people can't sweat at all. People are very different. You can have panic attacks and symptoms that go along with that. There's quite a few physical reactions that can happen, digestive issues, sleep problems. But the other things that are maybe sometimes easier to notice is, I just bit my husband's head off when he didn't do anything wrong, or my child is looking at me like they're scared. That might be another clue, because you are more easily irritable, if not angry, or just feeling overwhelmed and crying. All of those things are symptoms of stress.
Well, and I know I've experienced a dry mouth and also the sweating when I used to run a radio board at a radio station, which I'm more on this end, and I would be so tensed up that I'd wear a big cotton blouse or something, because what if I cut off some national speaker or something, and that would stress me more than doing an interview.
Right,
so I would pre-plan, that this may happen.
Right.
Okay, well, you would think all these signals, people would know when they're stressed. However, do people usually or always recognize when they're stressed?
Well, that's exactly why, thank you for asking, why we promote that stress scale, so people can learn to be self-aware. And when you are self-aware of the feelings that you're having, especially those hard, stressful feelings, and you can put them in words and have a plan for those, that makes you emotionally intelligent. And that can make all your relationships a little better, but it also gives you a little handle on what you need to work on too. So, for example, a parent who feels themselves getting angry at their children and they realize that they need to deal with their stress can say, I need to deal with you, but I want to take a little break so that I can calm down a little first. That teaches the child to recognize their feelings too, and to know that when they are asked to do a timeout, it's not a punishment. It's to help them kind of take a deep breath and have a chance to think about what they want to really say instead of what they say in anger.
Okay, so besides taking a break, can rest, sleep, vitamins, and nutrition play a part in combating stress? And if so, how would that help?
Well, in the physical realm, those are very, very important, because that's a big part of the parasympathetic nervous system physically. So we don't just need to process things emotionally and mentally, we need to process things physically. And so just the digestive process and giving your body what is healthy. And often, again, your body's overworked under stress, and so certain vitamins and minerals can more easily get depleted. So those vitamin supplements can really help. Good amount of water, of course. Just making sure that you're taking good care of your body and its needs.
Well, I immediately think of Elijah in the Bible after his whole fight with the Baal, priests, and he's depleted and he's run, and now he's afraid of Jezebel and not thinking rationally, right?
Right, exactly.
But what does God do?
Example.
He gives him rest and he brings him food.
Right.
So the same prescription.
Absolutely, very good, yeah.
What do you, and then how about exercise? I didn't mention that. I'm sure that factors in.
Exercise is in your planner. It's a big one in what you can do physically, because stress creates energy. Remember, to run away or to fight, and so that's a great way to use up that energy.
Okay. And do you have any other ideas to suggest to combat stress?
That's exactly what the planner is. Ideas that promote stress recovery coming from all different branches of medicine, behavioral health, and pastoral care too.
Okay. And then what you suggest is ways to start the stress recovery process. You know, say you've already gone through it, but now you need to get yourself back together.
Well, that's why you have a plan ahead of time, is you would become self-aware, get a plan of things that help people recover from stress, and then operationalize it as soon as you can.
Okay. And then how would people access your resources? I know it's a pilot, but can you explain what will happen later when they want these resources?
Right. Once we're fully up and running, we hope to post a full class about these resources and the resources themselves on our website.
Okay.
Or you can be a patient and get it right now.
Okay, right. Okay, is there anything else you would like to say to our viewers before we close?
Well, I always have to give a shout out to God, because stress is from fear, and it's His perfect love that can drive out all fear and can deliver us from fear. And sometimes there's a spiritual stronghold that we can only be released through prayer, and He's always good to bring peace.
All right. Well, Laura, thanks so much for being the guest on Showcase of Churches. This has been so good. I hope those of you viewing have gained some insights and help that will help your life and people you know. I certainly wished I had some of this years ago. Okay. Before we close, I'd like to read 1 Thessalonians 5:23, which has to do with this holistic thinking. May God Himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The one who calls you is faithful, and He will do it. So again, we can rely on Him for some of the help. Well, we've covered a lot of information, so you might want to view this program again. If so, besides seeing it on the channels that Metro uses, you can Google Lucy Met Production YouTube to see it again on my YouTube channel. All right, now we will post an information page showing how you can access these courses on managing and recovering from stress. Like she said, this is a pilot program, so you might have to wait a bit to see these resources, but we'll leave it up long enough for you to copy the information down. And we'll go ahead and leave it up, and you can write it down. And Laura, maybe you can read the website again for the people. And thanks again for coming to Showcase of Churches. Hope this has been helpful.